and let everybody join us. And what I'm going to actually do is I will pause the recording, but I'll make sure. Good afternoon, and let's get going. We are on our third running of the Creative Tools workshop series, which is kindly funded by Aspect. And this series has been created to help everyone who's joined us today with reaching new people with their research in different ways. And we've got a new series this time and some new speakers. So if you haven't seen this schedule, this is a reminder to get yourself booked on. Today is over to Ross talking about engaging video content. On Thursday, we've got branding, which is finding and speaking to the right audience, which Ross is going to talk about as well. It comes up every single series. So we thought we're going to do a whole session on that. So Sarah Howard's going to be doing that on Thursday. Got 2 AI sessions around leveraging generative AI tools and AI for creativity. 2 very different approaches. You've got Jules and Emma from We the Loves, and then we've got Blue O'Connor from LSE. So 2 very different approaches to AI. So please do come to both. It's definitely both worth attending. Data storytelling. We all collect loads of data while we're running our projects. What do you do with them to help you reach the right people? Again, you're going to talk about storytelling as well, Ross. This is basically always you lining up, isn't it? And then website fundamentals is the wrap up. So whether you're looking to build your own or commission someone to do it, we're going to have lots of great data on that. And that's my bit over, Ross. I want to get to the good stuff. I want to hear from you. And for anybody who has any questions on these sessions, please do pop me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. And also, we are recording all of these. So if you need to drop out at the end of this session or want to watch it back or read the transcript, they're all going to be put on the YouTube channel, which we'll be sharing after this. They'll be going onto the Aspect platform as well, because we are also aware that these are quite intense sessions. There's a lot of information to take in, so you can watch Ross all over again if you'd like to. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you, Ross? Come on.
Right, let me get my slides up. There we are. Okay. Yes, as Lucy said, today is all about video and sort of storytelling within video, and there are going to be a lot of common themes throughout all of the sessions as well. But my hope for today is just to inspire you to give it a go. If you haven't already tried making your own video content, you've been sort of curious to do it, you're maybe a consumer of content on social media or things like that, I hope to kind of dispel some of the myths and just build a little bit of your own confidence. And if there's just 1 or 2 things that you can take away from the next 90 minutes, as Lucy said, we're recording it all, so if you do want to digest the whole 90 minutes, that's fine. But if you go away with just 1 or 2 little things to try out or little bits of inspiration, then that's a win for me.
And do feel free to put questions in the chat, I should have said as well.
Yes.
One thing that we love about online, even though we'd much rather be in a room with you all, that's logistically quite challenging. The great thing about doing it online is that you can ask questions in the moment, and that will be my job, to be Ross's wing person, popping in, asking questions. If there's some that we're going to leave to the end, we will, but in the moment, it always feels fresher. So I'll be doing that with Ross. So ask questions, get involved, and we will go off at random tangents, but not too many, otherwise we'll be here all afternoon.
I'm going to start us with a random tangent though, Lucy, to get us a little bit warmed up and to start thinking about the things that we're watching. If you can share in the chat what you have been watching lately, by all means, no holds barred. If it's guilty pleasures, that's fine. It doesn't have to be academic or intellectual. Severance. You know what? I haven't watched any Severance, but I've heard lots of
you not watched Severance? Andor's great as well. Loving that. Yeah.
Andor is brilliant. Last of Us. Stanley Tucci in Italy.
That just makes you hungry, that programme. I've not seen the latest series of The Last of Us. I've seen the first one.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's fun. Wall-to-wall CBBS.
Stephen,
yes, there is another parent there. My little ones are with the in-laws today, so I have a moment of peace in the middle of half term. But yes, wall-to-wall CBBS in this house with us as well. Encanto, Endless Times. I know that feeling. I'm pretty sure I could sing every song. I won't subject you to it though.
I think watching has to be a varied diet for me. I do want some trash, and there are times where I don't want to use my brain either. You want to have the intelligence along with the sugar rush.
Yes. But with whatever it is that you enjoy, I think it's it's a worthwhile exercise sometimes to just kind of take a little step back from the screen and just have some moments to think about, like, why was I really gripped by that? Why was I really engaged by it? Whether it's whether it's reality TV, whether it's documentaries, whether it's dramas, fiction, non-fiction. If you can sort of take a moment and just sort of think, well, or even, if you're watching something and you go, well, that was a bit rubbish, I didn't really enjoy that. Where do you think the tellers of those stories and that video content, be it TV, online, on social media as you're scrolling, having those moments of, why was I so engaged by that? What did I find really relatable about it? How did they tell that story? What are some things that I could maybe take away from that in communicating the research that I'm doing? What made me want to scroll on? Why was I sort of bored by that? Why wasn't it engaging? And this is a thing that I think about constantly in the work that I do. As I'm a director. I've been a sort of film and video director now for 13, 14 years. I'm the founder and director of a video production company based in the Southwest called Watch and Learn Productions. And we focus on educational video production. My background, I studied chemistry at university, and then I went and studied journalism, video production, and I got really interested in the kind of fusion between the technical and the creative in communicating science. And so I've worked as a science communicator and video creator for over a decade now. And I'm hugely passionate about taking really complex technical information and getting creative with it and telling stories with it. And yeah, I really love that kind of challenge. But there's no one size fits all way to do it. Depending on the kind of content that you're creating, there are lots of different ways that you can put video together, depending on your audience, depending on your platform, the material that you want to talk about and the subject matter. So let's have another moment of interaction in the chat. And I want you to think about what types of video can you think about? What kinds of different formats do you either enjoy watching? Do you not like? Again, share some ideas in chat. What are some different formats for kinds of video? And it doesn't have to be for communicating scientific information, but YouTube Shorts, Instagrams, Reels, TikToks, yeah, social media stuff, vertical things, animation there from Liz, yeah. Animation's great for
I like a time
communicating
lapse as well. I'm with Kelly on
concepts.
that one.
Yeah,
They're lovely, aren't
time
they?
lapse. Yeah, you can. Yeah, video is a great medium to play with time in interesting ways, to slow things up, to speed them down. Slow things up, speed them down. That's a new one. Media interviews, Vox Pops interviews, things like that. Yeah, fantastic. Addicted to YouTube Shorts.
It's like a confessional.
There's something addicting about TikToks and Reels, right? Of just like that engagement and how
I'm
you
not really the
can
right
just kind of keep
demographic for
scrolling.
TikToks, Ross. You're making me feel old now. But I do watch
Well,
Instagram Reels. That's true.
okay. How it's made videos. Yeah,
They are
seeing
good. They're
how,
satisfying. Yeah.
inside how things are
Behind the
made.
scenes stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. So with all of these kinds of decisions that video creators are making about the kinds of videos that they want to produce, the content, who it's for, you, the viewer on the other end, as you're scrolling, changing the channel, whatever it might be, the people who are producing those videos are asking themselves a single question at every stage of production, whether it's coming up with the ideas, through to writing the scripts, thinking of who's presenting it, what location are we going to, what edits do I need to make, where am I going to cut things, what footage am I going to put with this bit of voiceover, how are we going to distribute it on what platform? And that singular question is just why? Why are we choosing to make this particular video? Why this audience? Why this platform? And for any of you that are curious about making your own video and are thinking about, well, I've got this material that I want to communicate, I've got this research or this science that I want to talk about, the first exercise to kind of go through is to think about, well, why do you want to make it a video? So let's break that down. What do we mean by that? Well, for the viewer, the question that they are going to be asking themselves as they're watching that content, subconsciously or not, is, why do I care? Like, why do I give a hoot about this particular content? Especially in the modern day of sort of digital information and the attention economy that we have on social media. We've talked about TikTok and Reels, Instagram. There are an infinite number of things that I, as a consumer of content, could be doing instead. So if I'm going to give you my time, that time is valuable to me. If I'm going to keep watching, then what is the kind of return on that for me? Now, many people aren't really consciously asking themselves this question, but it's the thing that is happening in their subconscious every time their thumb scrolls up and flicks on to the next video. Well, if you can't answer that question for them intuitively, why do I care? They're just going to sort of scroll and kind of move on, change the channel, watch something else.
The attention economy, I've never heard it referred to as that. But you're so right. I mean, I remember when we had 4 TV channels, and now we have got so much content, and our attention spans, we are forever flicking, aren't we? You know, looking at all those reels, we're moving from reel to reel. That makes it much more difficult to do your job, Ross.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And it's one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time before even turning the camera on answering these questions. Because if you can't do it, then you need to move on to a different idea. And yeah, I think the attention economy is also worth sort of thinking about as a consumer of content as well. I think more and more people being very intentional about where they are giving their attention, and the kinds of content that they want to consume, and curating their own channels of content, right? And deciding what it is that they do and do not want to watch. So for you as the creator, in order to try and answer this question from the viewer's perspective, why should the viewer care? You need to think about, well, who is the viewer? Who is watching it? And really drill down into this, because everyone is not an answer. All too often I'll be sort of speaking with clients and we'll think, well, okay, who's your target audience for this? Well, it's for everyone, and anyone can enjoy this. And if you're trying to make content that is for everyone, really, it's just going to be washed out and isn't going to be for anyone. And it's really worth spending some time to think about making that as specific as possible, across a range of different demographics. Is this content for single mothers who are retraining to change careers, and they're up in the middle of the night breastfeeding, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they're sort of scrolling online? Or really make that scene in your mind as specific as possible. Is it for a young teenager who's looking at different universities and thinking about going into higher education, or weighing that up sort of versus an apprenticeship role and getting some hands-on experience? And they are kind of interested in physics, but they're also really, their passion is getting hands-on with engineering and taking cars apart, right? And so as specific as you can make that, then all the better, right? That's really going to help you to start sort of having that crystallized in your mind and answering that question of why do I care when it comes to communicating your research. The other thing that you need to think about when you're ideating your content is, what outcome do you want? What is the thing that you want someone to know at the end of the piece, or what do you want them to do? And try and keep that to a single thing. So we want them to know at the end of watching this video piece, we just want them to know this one thing, and then go and apply that knowledge in a particular way. We've kind of made it relevant to this one person, and now they can take that knowledge and that information and apply it to their particular context. What do we want them to do? We want them to go to this particular website and sign up for this to learn about these particular opportunities, or sign up to, I mentioned apprenticeships, for example, to sign up for this apprenticeship scheme, or go to this event and do this one particular thing to find out more information. Try not to overwhelm them with choice and paralyze your audience with kind of indecision by saying, well, you've gotten to the end, now you can do this. There's too many sort of decisions. Even if you're directing them as the thing you want them to do, to go to this website where they might browse some different options, then they can get a little bit more choice, and you can offer some variety of different experiences or different outcomes for them. But initially at the end of the video, then you can think, well, what is the one thing I want them to do? Go to this URL, sign up to this newsletter, whatever it might be. So once you've identified those three things, you've got your viewer in mind, you've got your outcome, and you've identified the why the viewer and should care about all of that, then that is your content. That's your content for your video, and you can take that idea and you can start turning it into something. And when you have that idea for your content and you know all of those three things, then you can start matching that with the formats. So some of the formats that we were talking about earlier, interviews, vox pops, documentaries, infographics, all of these different things. This is just an example of, this is a small selection of different kinds of video that you can make, but you're matching your format to your content. And you really want to do it, that way around. Have your content first and you're matching the format to it, rather than thinking, well, we want to make a 2D animation of this scene. That seems really exciting. Animation's really engaging. And so, right, what can we talk about? If we want to make an animation to try and engage this demographic, what should that be about? Well, animation is really expensive. It can be really effective, but it's also very intensive on resources. It can take a long time. It's expensive to produce. So you want to be intentional about how you're using it. In that example, animation is great for communicating concepts, very abstract concepts, maybe things that don't exist in the real world or operating on a scale that's too large or too small for us to understand. We might use animation for the sort of microscopic or the atomic scale of things, or for teaching a kind of broader overarching concept before we talk about the application of that in something that's a little bit more grounded and a bit more real. But we would do that using a documentary style footage, or showing an example of a hands-on demonstration or something like that. We don't need 2D animation in order to do that. So we're matching the format with the content. And of course, video isn't always best for communicating that idea. This is probably something that's surprising to hear a video producer say. I've done a lot of work in my career with online training courses, for example, and with that, we would take a lot of information sort of structured within an online e-learning course, and we think intentionally about, well, where do we want to include particular diagrams? Where do we want to include photos? Where do we want to include video? And sometimes when you're communicating information in a learning environment, you just need to tell someone something. Video is great for showing, not so much for telling. If you're just talking at someone, you could just use a written article in order to do that. And then when you get to the bit where you want to show someone how something works, then you can include a video at that point. So be intentional about what kinds of media you're using to communicate your information. And if you feel like actually video maybe isn't the best format for this particular thing, that's okay. You can use a blog or a newsletter or something like that to do that instead, and then support it with a supplementary thing with video if it is needed. That's the difference between show and tell. So always consider where you're telling someone something and what you're showing them to back it up. I'm going to break down a few different examples of some different formats, just to give you an idea of some advantages and disadvantages when considering those formats. This is a talking head. It is literally that. It is just someone talking to you. Using this sort of intentionally is worth doing if you're building a connection between the person on camera and the viewer. Like I was just sort of saying about telling someone something, I would just be very mindful of that when you're kind of making that decision. If you feel like this is just going on for too long and they're just talking at someone, what are some ways we can kind of break that up? Do they need to do a demonstration? Do they need to show what's on their laptop? Even just talking through some slides and bringing something to life through some examples and some different diagrams. How can you try and break that up so you're not just telling someone something? And what does a video like this add for the viewer that isn't just gained by reading text on a screen instead? But it can be useful for building that kind of rapport and relationship with the presenter. You can also use a picture-in-picture screencast. So having the screen that you're sort of showing, but then having maybe a smaller window there. In this example, a teacher is sort of going through an example of doing some coding, like coding along. It's commonly used for like training, software training, step-by-step tutorials and things like that. But make sure that the viewer is still easily able to follow along with the steps being shown. And this is one of the advantages of video, in my opinion, is in a sort of e-learning context, is the viewer has the option to pause the presentation, or to pause the video, to stop it there, follow along, do some of the typing and coding along, see the result, play the video again, and continue that learning at a pace that works for them, rather than having all of that information flying by very, very quickly and they can't quite follow along. That gives them the option to sort of slow it down and to take it at a pace that is suitable for their own learning. Animation, as I was saying, is really useful for abstract concepts and relations. They can range from being really simple to highly sophisticated, complex 3D animations. But again, what is the added value of animation for the learner, for the student's learning? What does that justify? How can you justify the resources needed to produce it? If it's costing that much money, are you going to see the impact and the return on that animation in order to justify it? And finally, I'll just talk about demonstrations. Really useful for allowing viewers to see a concept or a process in action. What is the real world application of this? Rather than just seeing someone talking about it, they can see them doing it as well. So that's useful for showing experiments that viewers might not otherwise be able to see or do on their own as well. Maybe it's really expensive or technical equipment that they might not have access to, but they want to sort of follow along before deciding, is this something that I want to purchase on my own and make that investment so I can sort of get hands-on with it myself? Or they've got all of that equipment and they need to follow along step by step, putting something together, clipping it, getting it powered on. And in your narration as well, you should also be sure to not only describe what the learner is seeing, but also discuss why you're doing it in a particular way to make it extra engaging. At this point as well, I also want to mention accessibility when we're considering the pre-production of our content and the kind of ideation of what it is we want to make. Do not make accessibility an afterthought in the content that you create. So often I see this on social media videos where their captions are just sort of either auto captions, they're just kind of thrown on without any kind of consideration that they might be covering up essential information on the screen, for example. When we are producing things like animations, we're sure to always keep in our storyboards that lower third of the screen free, because we know that's where the captions are going to go in our material. If it's an infographic with lots of sort of labels of text and things like that, we wouldn't want that text to be on screen and then for someone to enable the captions and for it to be overlaid and that information to be obscured. But when it comes to things like captions on video, it's more than just your deaf viewers. I have a hearing loss ever since I was young. I have a hearing implant that allows me to hear, but I'm a closed captions user on all of the videos that I watch. But it's more than just your deaf or hard of hearing viewers. It could be someone who doesn't have English as their first language, is still learning that language. It could be someone in a busy or noisy environment. I mentioned in the persona that I generated off the top of my head earlier about someone being up in the middle of the night breastfeeding, then they might want to keep that volume down on their phone, for example. Auto captions on content, whilst that technology is slowly getting better, it's not really sufficient. It's not accurate enough. So make sure you're proofreading and editing that, and so that it's readable as well. Consider the color contrast that's there. Generally, white text on a black background is sufficient enough. A personal bugbear of mine on social media content is when you have what I call like karaoke style captions, where it's just a single word appearing on screen, one after another, each one a different color, and it's just I can't consume content like that. It's designed to try and grab people's attention. But for me, I just instantly scroll on because the way that I use captions to supplement the person that I'm hearing as well, that does not work for me. It's a real personal bugbear of mine and just doesn't seem accessible to me at all. When you're thinking about how long should my video be, how much do we need to go into, um, as short as it needs to be to communicate the idea, and sometimes less is more. I don't know about you, but I've certainly been guilty of thinking, well, I don't really feel like I've got time to watch a film this evening. I'm going to watch a TV series instead, and then we'll sort of binge 4 or 5 episodes of a series and end up spending more time watching that than I would have with a 90-minute film. And you know, that is a principle that is applied more and more when it comes to short form content online, to try and break it up into more digestible chunks. Instead of having a 20-minute interview with someone discussing their research, you could have 5 4-minute videos sort of chunked up into different parts that's a bit more digestible. Now, someone might watch all of those back to back because they're really engaged by the conversation, or they might just only have, I've only got 4 minutes now before my bus arrives. I'm going to watch this thing now on my phone. And then when I get into the office later, I can watch the rest of it. And maybe I'll watch some there on my lunch break, or I can watch some more when I get home.
And you can make them chapters, can't you? So back to, if you're you're really focusing, you can give them quite defined chapters about the why, when, how, what, whatever it might be. And if they are really precise and the storyboarding is really tight, you'll get everything you need from that 4-minute video potentially. Because there's always a temptation of all the things you could talk about, because there's so much more you could talk about. But you want people to be left wanting to know more. If your call to action is come and get involved in my project, you don't want to tell them everything about the project. You know, the purpose of the video is to give them enough of a tease that they go, oh my gosh, I've got to get in touch.
Yes.
So back to what you're saying is that duration is as long as it needs to be to get that key point across well. And that could be 30 seconds.
Yeah, it could be, right? And yeah, I would say, instead of thinking about it as like, oh, it's as long as it needs to be, it's as short as it needs to be. It's just like, we're getting that across. Here's that piece of information. We've communicated the piece of content. That's it. We don't need to keep reiterating it or keep repeating it. So what are some ways that we can tell these stories or these ideas? I want us to think now for a little bit about, again, how we're maybe using some different techniques. Instead of telling someone information, we're giving that information context with a story. We're making it engaging, we're making it relevant. So what is storytelling, or what is a story, right? If you can, let's try and take sort of 30 seconds to a minute, throw some answers down in chat. In your opinion, what is a story?
It takes me back to childhood when you ask about stories. I think about storytelling as a kid.
What was that for you?
Oh,
Lucy?
there we go. Well, Lydia, I think Lydia's actually put, that narrative of the beginning and middle and an end. A story.
Middle and end, yeah.
I mean, I've got the Pixar book, which I think you're going to talk about. Yeah, it's yeah. But it has to take you somewhere. A story has to take you somewhere.
So it's a sequence of events, and you say about taking somewhere, a journey, you know, so that beginning, middle, and end, we're going somewhere, learning something along the way.
Caring about some people. Good stories make you care about the characters, or
has something to say. Element of change, yes. So something is changing over the course of that story. Things are happening. There's some consequences to events. And learning something.
I mean,
Jessica's breaking that down. Yeah, great.
I also think about movies you talked about earlier. When you watch a film and when it's deeply dissatisfying, it's normally because it hasn't really told you the story, or you don't care about the characters, and you spend an hour and a half watching a film, and at the end of it, you might as well just gone to the shops. It's a bad video without the story is really obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can spot those films where elements are disconnected from each other and things are just kind of happening without them really relating.
It's so dissatisfying because you want to immerse. We all love stories. We want to immerse ourselves in the narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Lorraine's take there. It's like one of the oldest and most powerful ways humans share experiences, values,
Yeah.
and knowledge.
Yeah.
And it is the oldest way that we shared information, is telling stories to each other since we've been sort of gathered around fires, sharing knowledge and information and through memorable tales with one another.
Good.
Um, Now, when it comes to communicating science and academic research, right, it can be really easy to fall into the habit of communicating in an academic style that's drilled into us at universities, right? Research papers are intentionally designed to be unambiguous and importantly reproducible. So a paper often sounds like, well, we did this, then we did this, and we did it like this, which looks like this, and tells us that this happened. But each of those things is a great instruction manual, but it's just a sequence of events, one after another. It's not a story. And for an audience, there's no context, there's no relevance, no conflict or stakes, no plot, there's no emotion, no heroes or villains, there's no drama there to engage me as an audience and make me care about the science that's being communicated. But I feel like cinema and filmmaking can teach us a lot about communicating these stories. As we've been thinking about every stage of production, from writing to filming and editing, the creators are constantly putting themselves in the perspective of the viewer. What are the audience seeing? What are they hearing? What are they learning? What are they feeling? So let's have a look at some of these sort of common storytelling tropes. And I hope that they can provide you with a little bit of information, a little bit of inspiration for you to try in your next SciComm project. In the chat earlier, we had our classic 3-act structure, right? Beginning, middle, and end. And we were all taught this in school, that every story should have beginning, middle, and end. And it often looks a little bit like this. We have once upon a time in the beginning, and then something happened, and then the end, everyone lived happily ever after. But this can suffer from the same problem as before, right? It's fairly boring. There's no drama, there's no conflict or consequences. And so anytime you find yourself outlining a story and the words and then pop up, you no longer have a story. These events don't flow together, right? They're like 3 dominoes standing apart. And if you were to knock one of them over, nothing happens to the other 2. So how can we take these acts and start lining them up so that they interact with each other? When it comes to storytelling, if there's nothing else that you remember about storytelling, I want it to be these next 2 words, right? They're critical in telling any story. But and so. But is drama. But is conflict, disruption, and tension. But introduces your villain, gives your hero an obstacle to overcome. And so is consequences, for good or bad, right? So is action. It's overcoming a challenge, solving a problem, things going from bad to worse, maybe a redemption, or learning something new. Let's put our but and our so into our 3-act structure. So now we have this. Our scenes are connected together. Once upon a time, but something changed. So they overcame the challenge. This starts to flow together into a narrative. The dominoes no longer stand apart, but line up ready to topple into one another. Let's look at an example of this. So 3 little pigs lived in peace, but a hungry wolf demolishes their home. So the pigs learn structural engineering. So this classic bit of folklore, you're able to put in a but and a so and see how it's able to interact with one another, adding in some conflict and some consequences into it. I'd now like all of you to have a go. So in the chat, take a turn to write a short 3-sentence but so story. It could be a famous folk tale, it could be something from literature, film, theatre. Don't give it away, but like see if you can identify some people's submissions. We'll give you
You have to do some teasers.
yeah. We'll give
Brilliant.
you a minute to jot down those ideas.
I
And
love
try
the
and
way that
identify that
changes it.
but and
So
so.
it's so subtle.
Mm. And the content doesn't really have to change. So with a Three Little Pigs example, right,
Mm.
you could phrase that as like three little pigs lived in peace, then a hungry wolf demolishes their home, then they built a house out of bricks. Right? But just adding in that but and so just adds a little bit of conflict in there. There's a villain.
Mm.
This, we've living peacefully. This thing, external forces come in and sort of disrupted things. So what are we going to have to do in order to overcome it?
Yeah. I know there's lots of furious typing going on. There's lots of people being creative.
That's right.
We're gonna have a flurry in the chat.
A boy and a girl fall in love, but they're from warring families,
Do we
so it
get
all
tested
ends in
now that we've got to
tragedy.
name all these stories roles?
Yeah.
This is what you created now. Okay. Cool.
This is a fun game for me. Town enjoys summer, but there's a hidden danger, so a small group of rescuers risk their lives to save the town. Absolutely fantastic. I've spotted Titanic. Excellent, Anjali. Thank
It
you.
was a big wardrobe door. They both could have fitted on it. I've never seen Titanic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Already we've had two Shakespearean ones in there as well. Very good. Lorraine, that's fantastic. That's a really nice personal one for people as well. Father wanted to quit smoking, improve his health, but he struggled with cravings and stress whenever he tried. So he joined a local support group and started using nicotine patches, which helped him stay on track.
Hmm.
Fantastic. Yeah, so you
There's
guys,
some good ones in there.
yeah, you're starting to see it. The last one there as well, we touch on Mirabelle. So this is a classic Pixar story with Encanto. So let's build upon this. We've had one but and one so in these short stories. We're going to expand on that now because we don't just have to have one of them. We can start threading them all together. Pixar does this all the time. They use a method called the story spine, which is really just an expansion on the but so framework. So every Pixar story goes like this. Infamously, Toy Story, you can probably start to put the bits together in your mind as you think about this. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Andy who played with his toys every day. But one day it was his birthday and he got a new toy called Buzz Lightyear. Because of that, because of that, because of that, until finally, and ever since then, Woody and Buzz have been friends. So Pixar animations have been using this template to tell captivating stories for decades now. And now that we've stepped back and we're looking at this conflict and consequence model, you can start to see where the buts and the so's are in this particular framework. And it shows us, we can build on this. There's more than one way to tell a story. And we can start threading them together so we have multiple buts, but, so, but, so. We're threading them all to create a bigger narrative. What if, though, instead of starting your story at the beginning, you want to start it in the middle of things or in medias res? So medias res is a really fun way to grab the attention of your viewer and establish the stakes early on. You can start with an exciting, action-packed or an emotive, unexpected scene. The Wachowski sisters use this in the opening scene of The Matrix, as Trinity is being immediately pursued by agents in an action-packed sequence that fills the audience with curiosity. Who is that? Why are they there? Why did that happen? Why did they react like that? What's going to happen next? All of these little questions start bubbling up and filling you with curiosity, and before you know it, you're hooked, you're engaged in the story. And remember, heist movies don't show a 30-minute in-depth planning scene describing all the action before it happens. You see the outrageous stunt, and then they reveal how it was all part of their clever plan all along. And they go back. Clips from video podcasts use this all the time on social media. You'll see the reaction from someone, some laughter or shock from a speaker. I can't believe that. And before sort of they hook you in with that, and then they rewind to show you what was the phrase or what was the conversation that caused that particular reaction. So you can play with time in this way. You don't have to be linear. Similarly, we can use a flashback to previous events, and that can provide context. It can show a new perspective on why something is happening, why someone is feeling or reacting in a certain way. And you can also break the fourth wall and acknowledge the presence of your viewer. Now, between you and me, this isn't just confined to film. Breaking the rules to add an aside or a little footnote, a parentheses, can help to draw the viewer in and make them feel like the story is just for them. But it's also really useful for sharing subtext like narration, secrets, and inner monologues. One of my favorite directors is Steven Spielberg, who uses the bait and switch tactic all the time in his filmmaking. On the surface of this film, one of my favorites, Jurassic Park. It's a film that looks really exciting. It's an exciting story all about dinosaurs. Who wouldn't want to see that? But what makes this film a memorable story is that it's not really about dinosaurs at all. It's about fatherhood. It's the role of a parent in nature versus nurture. And that being a father isn't about your genetics, but your actions. And this is what makes a dinosaur film a human story, and arguably why all the sequels feel so hollow. And finally, one of the most famous storytelling techniques is the infamous hero's journey, aka the monomyth. Now, this template has become synonymous with storytelling in cinema. Famously, the most popular film franchise of all time, Star Wars. But if you're familiar with the story of A New Hope, you can look at the structure and start to piece together the main beats of the story. Our hero's ordinary world, his call to adventure, initial refusal of the call, meeting his mentor, Obi-Wan, crossing the threshold, flying with Han Solo on the Millennium Falcon, tests allies and enemies in the form of Darth Vader, and approaching the innermost cave in the Death Star, before eventually taking the road back, his resurrection as the Death Star is destroyed, and he returns back to the Rebel Alliance with the elixir of hope. When you're thinking about your own story, consider who is the hero of it. What is their journey? What villains and ordeals must they overcome? What treasure will they find at the end of their adventure? So when you're thinking about how you're communicating science, think about how are you telling this story? What is the journey that is taking place here? Who is the hero? Is it the researcher? Is it the science? Or maybe you could make the hero the audience, and you and maybe the researchers that you're talking to or interviewing are the mentors along the way, solving problems and overcoming ordeals and villains, creating the elixir of truth at the end. So that's all about storytelling. I hope there's a few bits of inspiration there. I want to move on now from thinking about these stories in pre-production and planning out those stories into the tools that we can use to start creating that content. There's three things that I want to talk about for helping us to tell our stories around the campfire or to a video camera. The first is a script. The second is a camera. And then I also want to talk about your voice in talking to camera as well. So I've got a few pieces of advice when it comes to script writing, getting your ideas down on the page. The first one, we've said this before, keep it short, as short as it needs to be. About 300, 350 words on a page will translate to about 5 minutes of video by the time you've added in transitions, different bits of footage, allowing some time for that story to breathe a little bit. Keep it to around 300 words and that'll be your sort of optimal 4-minute YouTube video. Get to the point. As soon as you can, get in there, get straight to the point. Instead of starting your videos in a way that is like, hello everyone, and welcome to this video from the University of Bath Department of Chemistry. Today in this video, I'm going to be telling you all about electrochemical reactions that happen in battery technology. You could just start with the fundamental technology behind batteries is, just get straight into it. Think of other ways to include that information, maybe a lower third on the bottom.
A bit of data. You want to, it's like doing a pitch, isn't it? A video in many ways is like a pitch. You want that killer stat. We're going to do data storytelling later on, but that also something quite controversial. And did you realize that 10,000 blah, blah, blah? Then you kind of like, oh, okay. But
Yeah, so
it's
even
sometimes quite hard to get your own hook, isn't it? You might need to get an external perspective because you're very close to your own projects.
yes, yeah. Think about so good hooks. So a better way to phrase that example would be, how often do you recharge your batteries at home? Do you recycle your batteries? I think what are the ways that you can make it relevant to the individual? Talk about, every year so many millions of tons of batteries are thrown into landfill, and so right, you're adding a problem there at the very beginning. You're introducing your villain, and then right, what's the solution? How can we understand this
And you've
particular
got your
problem?
audience in mind, so you know who
Yes,
you're talking to, and you know that he, she, or they, that's what's important to them. That is the reason that they're going to be a part of your project or part of your research or whatever the call to action is. But yeah, that hook should be talking to the person because you've identified who this video is for.
yes, absolutely. um Continuing our theme, be ruthless. When you're writing out your idea and your script as well, I should mention, doesn't have to be word for word what you're saying. It can just be a series of bullet points. It can be 5 bullet points that you write down that you're talking about. It doesn't have to be exact. You can throw out all the conventions of usual grammar, all the best practices of writing that your English teacher drilled into you. And the script is a tool that you use to help you remember what it is that you're going to say, and you're communicating it to the camera. So you don't have to worry about the placement of commas, about sentence structure and things like that. And so when it comes to editing it and thinking about back to your viewer, back to why you're creating your content, does this sentence work? Does it serve the needs of my viewer in this? And if it doesn't, strike it off. Get a red pen, don't worry about it, throw it on the cutting room floor. Be ruthless. If you're struggling with that and you're not sure about, God, how can I start to edit this script down? I've got 600 words on the page and Ross is telling me I should aim for maybe 350. Step away from it. Go for a walk, go get some lunch, go for a coffee, do something else, go to the gym, sleep on it, and come back with fresh eyes, and you'll see it in an entirely different way.
There's a really good point from Kristen on the chat that Hannah Fry does this really well,
Yes, does
explaining
it really
complex
well.
concepts, really engaging people, making us also feel like we know more about the things she's talking about than we really do. But she's
Mm.
never patronizing. She uses plain
Hannah's
English. She's fabulous.
Hannah's content is excellent because she's also really great at finding the human story within the information she's talking about. She will often look back at historical figures, placing them at the kind of center of it. What is the journey that they went through? What are the obstacles that they overcome? What was the innovation that they developed? Hannah Fry is one of my favorite storytellers when it comes to SciComm content. And my final bit of advice with scripting: read it aloud. You absolutely have to say the words that you want to say aloud. You don't have to turn the camera on, but there will always be something that you will want to change when you're saying it versus how you're just reading it. There are different modes of communication between the written word and the spoken word. So read it aloud, practice it, and make edits as you're going along. But it's a tool for you to be using it, talking to camera, reading aloud. So you absolutely have to take that step as well. So that's your script. The camera, what camera are you going to use? For individual content creators, you already have one. You have a phone in your pocket. Camera technology has come on in leaps and bounds and is such that I think getting bogged down in shopping around for this camera or that camera, it just becomes a hurdle and an excuse for people. And so I think if you're new to creating content and communicating it online, you can use the camera in your phone, get used to that, have some practice at doing that first before you can start exploring other cameras that you might want to invest in, because you're not going to know exactly what's going to work for you in the kinds of videos that you're creating, the kinds of stories that you're going to tell, exactly what content, exactly what camera is going to suit you. And if you are thinking about buying some equipment and improving the production quality of what you're creating, the first thing you should do is prioritize your audio before anything else. If people can't hear you, they're not going to listen. They're just going to move on. So this is why you'll often see so many creators online using small little Bluetooth microphones so that they can be heard clearly. And any background noise especially if they're outside or somewhere busy. It reduces all of that and means that you can be heard much more clearly. Start small, as I said, using the camera on your phone. You can use webcam. If there are DSLRs and things available. I just have this on my desk, which is why I'm grabbing it. This is a little Sony camera that's really nice and portable. I've got bigger DSLR cameras and things that I use, but I would take it slow, like start really small with the equipment you already have available to you. The story and everything we've talked about prior to this is more important than how crisp the image is on screen. If you are using your phone or any kind of camera and you're framing it up, keep your camera in line with your eyes. Put the lens in line with your eyes and it will all be fine. You don't want to be like that with the camera sort of looking up at you, and you don't want to be right at the top of the screen with your head cut off. Put it in line with your eyes. Keep it nice and level. Give plenty of space at the bottom of the screen for captions to appear. If you have any graphics maybe appearing around you, so a little bit of space for that. But keep it at eye level and you'll be fine. Have some clear lighting. Daylight is great. Put yourself next to a window. Make sure that people can clearly see your face. I rely a lot on lip reading for understanding people when I'm talking to them or when I'm looking at videos. So if it's in a dimly lit room, that's a little bit more difficult. And also just avoid distractions. If you've got a big poster behind you with lots of text on it, people might be tempted to be reading that instead of listening to what you're saying. Or if you're in a busy environment and there is, a couple of people sort of behind you doing their own thing, doing something that is kind of distracting, then again, that's going to draw people's attention away from the information that you're conveying. The final tool that I want to talk about when it comes to presenting your content to camera is your voice. And this is the difference between reading and being a storyteller. There are lots of different things that you can do with your voice, but the main thing I would encourage you to do is to be playful, to play with it. Your voice is an instrument that you can use. And if you were listening to an instrument that only was playing a single note over and over and over again, that's not a very nice song to listen to. And the same is true when you're talking. You can use the volume of your voice. If I want to grab someone's attention and get them to all sit up and listen, then I can raise the volume of my voice. And if I want to draw them in, and again, help them to lean in, listen to what I'm saying, I can use a bit of a whisper and a lower volume. Now, if you used either one of those, then it would start to grate and wear thin after a little while. So some contrast is key. Use it intentionally. Pitch is another way that you can change the tenor of your voice. This is really helpful for when it comes to lists. So you can just alter the pitch of your voice as you go through a list, going up and down. For example, one of the fundamental basic processes of computing is input, process, output. With each one of those steps, I'm just raising the pitch of my voice, having input, process, output. It makes it a little bit more engaging rather than just having that kind of monotone. You can also change the tempo of your voice. This is great when you have a lot of energy and enthusiasm about whatever it is that you're talking about. I can get you really excited as well, and hopefully some of that energy and enthusiasm rubs off on you and you start to get really excited as well. But I can't just keep going and going and adding to all of this energy. It's got nowhere to go. The balloon just can't keep inflating and inflating. Eventually it's going to pop. So if I really want someone to listen, all I have to do is slow down.
This is why
So
we love David Attenborough, isn't it? When you talk about
100%.
voice, I think Attenborough, because he has so many nuances.
Absolutely. And I think Attenborough is an important person to remember when it comes to this, because so often when we think about energy in storytelling and in video, it is about, oh yeah, really high energy, right? And it's that like theatrical kind of thing, and it's grabbing people in that way. I would argue David Attenborough has very high energy, but it's authentic in a way that is very gentle. It is soft. It is so engaging, but the energy comes through in his enthusiasm and the way that he feels about the things that he's talking about. It's so genuine and authentic. The energy is there at the core of it, and you can't help but be enthused by it, even though he's really soft spoken.
You can't go high energy all the time. It's like watching kids television, and it's just exhausting, isn't it?
Back to wall CV
We're
beats
back to
again.
that, yeah.
So contrast is really important, I think, when it comes to this, and finding the right rhythm, find the feeling of different words, right? If I'm talking about something that I'm really excited about and really happy about, that's coming across in my facial expressions, that's changing the tone of my voice. If I were talking about climate catastrophe and I had this expression on my face and this sort of tone of voice, it's a little jarring, right? It doesn't match up with the content that I'm communicating.
Can I make your audience do some work? Who
Yes,
would you
please.
all like to narrate your videos? Because I think Hannah Fry has also got a great voice.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brian Cox, the astronomer, Nigella Lawson, yeah.
Nigella Lawson.
That would be. I love Nigella, but again, very calm, but a bit of fun to her voice. But she's
Mm-hmm.
not fun as in, oh, Patrick Stewart,
Patrick
yeah.
Stewart's great.
Tom Hardy, Simon Reeves, Simon Fry, yeah. There's a reason why Stephen Fry does a lot of ebook
Vixen.
of books, isn't it? Because he's just got such a great tone. But I
Mm.
also think it's quite interesting to think about who you would have as your ultimate narrator, because that is something about the tone, isn't it, of your piece?
Mm.
Because Benedict
Uh,
Cumberbatch versus Samuel L. Jackson, they're quite different energies. So it's like, oh, I've chosen that person, therefore maybe this is where I'm going with my storyboard, and
yeah.
my Eddie Izzard's fabulous as well.
Namrata asks a really good question there of like, it's really difficult to do this when you're talking into the screen. Any idea on how to make it easier?
Mm.
Um, Two things. We've touched on one of them, which is talking about something that you are already genuinely passionate about, genuinely enthusiastic about. So we had our David Attenborough example. If you're trying to kind of force that enthusiasm and talking about something that you have no interest in, I think the audience will start to pick up on that. So be in, authentically enthusiastic about what it is you're talking about. So if you're already really excited and passionate about this particular subject, talk about that and it will shine through. Um,
The way you
there's...
address this, Ross, is that you interview people. So when you've made me talk to screen, which is horrible,
Don't
we're
say
having,
that.
yeah, no, because for all the reasons that Namrata's saying, is like, oh God, this is horrible. I don't want to see myself on screen. But what you do as a tool is, and you can all do this if you even if you're recording on your phone, is talk to somebody else and just have
Mm,
and but be recording yourself. Because if someone's having a chat with you about your project, about why you love it, what's happening, who you want to get involved, and you're looking almost beyond your phone to them, you'll capture some great content and it'll feel
yeah,
much calmer.
yeah. I think imagine you either imagining getting someone on the other end, behind the camera, who's who you like and you find easy to talk to,
Yeah,
on a video call, something like that, and you're just talking to them.
it's much better.
And that kind of engagement of just, oh yeah, we're just having a conversation, they're just talking directly to
We just
me.
had Alan Rickman come in. I love Alan Rickman. And there's
Yeah.
also a quite comment here about scripts, and I agree. You don't want
Yes.
a script that is so tight, but you do need pointers, as you said, Ross. You need to know what you're going to be saying.
Yeah, I think it's important to think that's all the script really is. It's just thinking about, before you turn the camera on, what are the things I'm going to be saying,
Yeah.
and that script is just a tool that you're using to get there to help you.
Don't use it as something that
So
makes you feel wooden. Just go, right, what
yeah,
is
yeah.
my, and even if you just remember your key killer stat at the beginning, a bit of
Mhm.
data and the call to action, um, that for me is what I needed. We always went off piste with script, but I knew roughly what I was
Yes.
supposed to be saying.
But for some people, the process of scripting is useful to get those ideas out and to think about what are the things I want to say, what's the order in which I want to say them, and
Massively useful.
they've got
Yeah.
those 300 words, and then they put it to one side
It makes you be
because
brutal as
they've done that
well.
work.
It really
Yes,
makes you edit the stuff you don't need to say back to that.
it helps you to edit it. And then from that, you might just pull out, well, these are the 3 bullet points that I need to help me remember all of that stuff. And I've got a post-it note up next to my camera that has, here's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Here's the 3 points, and that's all I need to remember. And it's different for different people. Whenever I'm filming with folks for online course content, for example, we'll have a teleprompter there, and some people really feel like I need the words I need to know exactly what it is that I'm saying, because my memory is not going to function. Otherwise, I've got so many other things I'm thinking about. I'm just going to read what's on the teleprompter, and I'm there to direct them and help them feel a little bit more natural. Other people will be like, you've got all the words there. I'm not going to read it. They're my 3 bullet points. I'm just going to go through with that. And and there's everything in between, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is. Thank you for the reminder of my second point. So we talked about genuine enthusiasm, and this did kind of lead on to the conversation, which was talking to someone, either talking to someone or picturing someone in your mind's eye about who you were talking to, and if try and get that as close to someone that you know and lines up with your target audience. So, okay, I'm creating some content for teenagers. Who are the nephews and nieces that you know in your life that you can talk to, and have that in mind. And that's even useful when you're scripting as well. But when you're talking to them, try and keep that person in your mind, so you don't slip into habits of, oh, I'm talking to my peers at an academic conference, versus, oh, this is a video piece that's for a younger audience, and so I need to be mindful of the kind of language that I'm using. So I think genuine enthusiasm and trying to have that persona either with you when you're filming or in your mind's eye at all times as well.
There's a really good comment about the curse of knowledge as well. If you know your research so well, sometimes it's hard to kind of suddenly to camera become enthusiastic about it. So I think the point there about having a bit of a chat, which I know you do as well, is kind of talking around it and then moving into the point to warm people up. Because yeah, you suddenly you overthink it when there's a camera in front of you. So those warm up ideas,
Yes.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, Liz, that's a great. It's something we do as well. Get people to talk about their breakfast. What have you done today? What did you do on the weekend? Just something that's not the content that you're trying to talk about. And like, oh, we're just having a conversation. We're just sort of at ease. We're just sort of talking between friends, and then you can sort of lead into the material that you're talking about as well. We can come back to, we've got some time for some Q&A at the end, hopefully, so we'll come back to this, but I really love sort of talk about this with you all. I briefly want to mention one other tip for voice, which is the thing that can catch people out when they get to the end of the video that they're talking about, and then they just kind of feel a little bit left adrift. They don't know where to go. It's just, that's it. And it's just sort of left hanging there. So one tip that I always give for when you're coming to the end of a video is listen to the tone and pitch of your voice. Imagine you're telling a story to a toddler and you get to the end. And it's that little step down. So we're slowing the pace and just dropping the pitch. And that's just telling whoever's watching, okay, you can go. We've got more content for people who are still sticking around, but that is a little vocal thing that you can use to indicate to the viewer that's the end, but also it helps you when you're delivering a piece to know, or what do I do? How should I sort of end this? Just imagine you're telling a story and you get to the end. Okay, to wrap up the rest of the session before we get to Q&A, I also want to address a couple of other frequently asked questions that I get as the owner of a production company, which is, how much does a video cost? Now, this is a question I get a lot. I don't have a singular answer to it because no two videos are the same. Whenever I get that, I will automatically go back to all of the things that we've already covered. Who's it for? Why do you want to make it? What kind of video do you want? What's the information that you're talking about? But if you work for an organization that's thinking about hiring a production company, I want to give you just a few pointers in the right direction. My first piece of advice is to consider the iron triangle of production management, which is you've got to choose 2 of these 3 things, whether you want it good, cheap, or fast. If you want it good and fast, it isn't going to be cheap. You might have it good and cheap, but it might not be fast. I don't think anyone ever wants the cheap and fast and not good option. But this is it's a useful framework to keep in mind. And the reason for that, I think, and the reason that there's not a singular budget to any particular project, is because there are so many different variables. The length of the video, are you shooting on location? Is there animation? How many crew do we need? All of these little sliders can affect the sort of final price of a video if you're commissioning a company to make it. I will give you a kind of piece of advice when it comes to budgeting, which can be useful if you want to create something but you're not the budget holder in your organization and you want a ballpark figure to go to someone in charge and try and get that signed off, which is to try and budget for about £1,000 per minute of video. So if you want a 5-minute explainer for YouTube, or a documentary piece that highlights innovation research that's happening in your university, you want it to be about 5 minutes, you're looking at around about £5,000, or anywhere between 4 and 6, to add some error bars on either side of that. That is just a general rule of thumb, but it can be helpful to have in the back of your mind. I've had people come to me in the past and say, okay, we want a long multi-part series that's going to be 8 5-minute videos. We're going to have it on location. We're going to have bits of animation and this and that and the other. And I'll come back and say, well, that's going to be about sort of £35,000 to £40,000. And then you see the whites of their eyes and they run screaming for the hills. But that is all before they've really had conversations with a producer about, does it need animation? Does it need to be on this location? What are the ways that we can try and make something like this happen? Do we need all of that? You might have plucked that, duration of all of that content out of thin air, when I could look at that and say, well, you don't actually need 8 different videos. You could probably just do 2, and just use them here and here, or make them a bit shorter and sort of sprinkle them throughout, and it'll be a bit more impactful. People might actually watch it then.
Did you think it's better to have a chat with someone like you before we go and get budgets? Because obviously some of us know what the budget is, so sometimes you're going to have a conversation where people are going to come to you and go, look, I've got £6,000, what can I do? And other people are saying, look, I'm going to try and apply for a grant, or I'm going to try and add this into my project budget. Is it then better to have the conversation and go, I'm going to go, I don't know what to ask for, actually, is where a lot of us stand, is because, as you say, how it could be anything.
Yeah. And it could be anything, right? It's how long is a piece of string, and it is, pardon stacking the idioms together, but it's also like chicken and egg, right? It's always a standoff when it's, what's your rate? How much is your budget? What's the budget? How much is your rate?
I like the better question of what does it need to do?
I
really like what you just said there. So what's the purpose of this video? Therefore, this is what will get us there.
Yes, yeah. And I think if you have a budget in mind, whichever department has sort of signed off, okay, we've got £6,000, then come and have a conversation, and I'll tell you, right, here are 3 options for what we can do with that budget and where it's going to go, and then we can think about, what's going to be most effective, what's going to have the most impact depending on your goals and the outcomes you want to achieve. And then sometimes, if you're applying for a grant and you go, well, I don't quite know how much to sort of stick down, this kind of ballpark can just give you something to play with, or like I said, come and have a chat, whether it's with me or another production company. They'll happily sit down for half an hour and sort of sketch out an idea with you, and then give you, well, okay, we've identified this is the optimal sort of approach that we would like to take, and it's going to cost £10,000-15,000. You can put that into your grant application, and then cross your fingers. The other caveat that I'll add to this is that it's double that for animation, so keep that in mind as well. I use animation on my projects. There's absolutely a place for it, but it is a kind of premium. It does come at an expense, so you have to be intentional about where you're using it in your video content. I'm going to start wrapping things up before we get to a Q&A at the end, with just some final bits of advice for anyone that's creating content or thinking about video and communicating research. The first thing is give it a go. Creating video content online has never been more accessible than it is right now. um, the worst that will happen is better than if you hadn't have made it, right? If you know the two sort of timelines that can emerge of like the world in which you didn't make the piece of content is worse than if you've made a piece of content where you think, well, that wasn't the best thing in the world, but actually I learned a bunch of stuff from it, and the next one I make is going to be better. The first video you make is going to be the worst, and that's okay. I think it's still worth going through that process and not seeing those things as points of failure, but seeing them as moments of learning that you kind of build upon each time you go through it. And you think, well, this time I would do something a little bit different. I'd try that out, or I'd do this instead. Which is my second point, is that creativity takes practice. Creativity is not an innate talent that some people are just miraculously born with. I think true creativity takes a lot of practice. It is a muscle that needs to be used. And the only way that you can learn through that is by doing, and to iterate from it and to learn from your mistakes. And that is how you get more creative and get better in creative fields. We've hammered this home throughout over the course of the session, but authenticity is really key. I think people will always value real human connection. So be genuine, be honest, and make it human, make it relatable. Have people presenting, find human connection in the things that you're creating, and progress beats perfection. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You might have in mind from the content that you've seen online or the things that you enjoy watching, gosh, that seems unobtainable because it looks so good. It sounds, you know, they've got all of this equipment and all of this kind of stuff. Don't let all that perfectionism hold you back from trying it, and keep learning, keep getting better. I'm going to leave it there and open up the floor for a little bit of Q&A. I'm sure people have lots of questions, and we'll try and cover everything we can over the next 10 minutes or so.
I was going to say, with getting started, I feel like social media is the perfect platform to have a play. Whether
yes.
you create an Instagram account for your project, and you can start with reels, because of course they disappeared, I think stories anyway.
Yeah,
One of those.
yeah. So, you know, and you can just the process of just being creative and trying it out and doing that, I think, could be really rewarding without getting hung up on the like, oh, is it cringy? What are people going to think? Because you just sort of throw it out into the wind, and either people will love it, or you know, they'll move on, and that's fine. That's okay.
Social's a really great way to start a conversation, and video's an even better way to do that. And so creating the platform where the person you want to speak to is, obviously the platforms have different demographics, and creating some content that works for them. You will also start creating quite a nice repository of content, as you say, that worked and what didn't work. And I think, yeah, a good point is creativity is a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, the more intuitive you find it, the more you learn what worked and what didn't work. I think social, we have such a brilliant platform to have a play. And then as and when you do get to a stage, maybe you have some budget to engage someone like yourself, Ross, you can go, well, here's actually what we want to do. This is the essence of us. We now know what we want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make an important point there about being playful with it. I think, yeah, just play, have fun with it as well, right? And that will shine through in the concept that you make. Yeah, I think that's really important. Give yourself permission to play in the things that you're doing, and you'll enjoy it so much more. Train that muscle. You know, for me, I struggle to watch anything back that I made 2 or 3 years ago, because I would think, oh God, I do it this way, or I do it, you know. but the only way that I've gotten to that point is by doing it over years and years of practice, and that's the only way that I've improved. And I think that's true in any field,
We've got a couple
whether
of questions.
it be technical or creative.
Yeah, I'll go absolutely.
Go
So we've got one about where you should disseminate your finished video. For me, that really will go back to who is it for, why are you creating it, where should it be is maybe the right question there.
Yeah, it's, you know, who are you trying to reach? You know, I think if you're kind of making something that's, you know, for you, is a little bit of practice, that's fine. That's fine too, by the way. If you're just making something that's for you as some practice, your platform of choice, be it Instagram, Reels, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever it is, wherever you like to play. If you're creating something for a particular audience in mind, different audiences, different demographics will be on different online platforms, or you'll have something that's very specific for people who are taking this, massive online course on a particular service, and that's where it's going to go, because that's where those learners are for taking this Open University course, for example, or something like that. Or it's going to go on TikTok because you want to reach millennials or Gen Z. So yeah, it kind of depends a little bit on your audience and thinking about it that way.
And there's another great question about editing software, and
Mm-hmm.
that has come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it, over the last few years? There's some
Yes.
amazing, really good free editing software these days.
Yeah. So a lot of, if you're creating video for social, they will have inbuilt video editing tools. Instagram, it is kind of just they've embraced the kind of one take model, like, which is scary, but also like really freeing sometimes, to just press record and just go with it and then throw it out into the wind. TikTok's video editor is really great, really easy to, like, if you do make a mistake or a fumble and you want to go back and you edit it and trim the clips or move clips around, you can have lots of fun with different effects, green screen effects and things like that as well. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, also makes a piece of video editing software called CapCut.
I've
Um,
used that. That was really intuitive.
Yes, it's really intuitive, really easy to do, easy to import different bits of video clips and have maybe a voiceover and this bit of video that you've sort of filmed of something else at a conference or something, and then sort of layering all of that. Really intuitive and easy to use on mobile. If you're on desktop and you want to get a little bit more technical, DaVinci Resolve is totally free video editing software. It's sort of industry standard. If you want to go a little bit deeper than that, you can start looking at Adobe, the Adobe suite of products. I edit in Adobe mainly just because that's the kind of industry standard between creatives. If I'm working with freelance editors and things like that, we're all often working in Premiere Pro and Adobe and After Effects. But you don't need to worry about all of that. I would say if you're just starting out, just use
CapCut, I found
CapCut.
CapCut was good, although someone has says that they're paywalling things, which is frustrating, which probably means somebody else will be on them. There's a really good question here about primary audiences and secondary audiences and how you approach that. How do you approach when there are two different audiences that you'd like to communicate with in one video? Should you try? How would you approach that?
How vastly different are those audiences, and do you need to make two videos?
Okay.
Um, it Yeah, if there's a lot of overlap between them, you might be able to get away with it. If you're talking to 13-year-olds and retirees, for example, they're like at different ends of a spectrum, and so they have different needs and different interests, and so you might actually think, well, we're going to make one video for that audience and one video for this audience, and we're going to put that one on Facebook and that one's going to live on TikTok, and sort of tailoring it that way. But then
So
you get
maybe
into
a
the
mapping
waters of
exercise
like,
there.
oh, our
Yeah.
budget is only going to cover us for one video and things like that. So yeah, it depends on how much overlap there is between them.
There's a mapping exercise. And we have another question around, I wonder if you could say some more about, expand on the choices involved in matching format to emotional dynamic of the content or the content itself, e.g. talking head for relationship and rapport demonstrations for showing action. We're getting increasing calls in my organisation for visual content, and it'd be great to justify why I'd want to create one form of content over another.
Um, Can you
I
repeat
think
that
that
question for me? Sorry, I can't
Yeah,
read it.
no, I
I'm not
think
sure.
that
It's
I
not in the
think this
chat for
going
me.
back to your point at the beginning about the sort of demonstrations for showing an action and talking head for building a relationship. I think it's going back to your early slides about what type of format of video maps into what kind of emotional dynamic and
Mhm.
how you justify. Again, it feels like a mapping exercise of mapping out what each piece of visual content needs to do and who it's for.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess there was a note on like the emotional hook, and having those personas in mind and doing, you can go deeper on that and think about, well, what are the emotional hooks for that demographic? What are the things that they care about? What are their values? and how you position things in that way. So let's take an example of climate change communication, for example. So for I'm going to generalize and use some stereotypes, so apologies for this, but just for the exercise, I think older demographics might be concerned more about local communities, their own neighborhoods, that sort of thing, and like maybe countryside, that kind of stuff. So you kind of frame it in like, what are the things that they might be sort of typically interested in their area. Younger generations might be more concerned with activism, like an activism narrative or something like that, or sort of taking that kind of approach with something. So how you frame it might be very different depending on that. I'm aware that there's some stereotypes and a little bit of ageism in there. I'm not saying that there can't be some overlap between those things, but I think it's just worth really trying to put yourself in the mindset of like, who is that audience, and what are the things that they kind of emotionally care about in terms of getting that initial hook and like emotional investment.
And how do they
in a
best
piece.
also relate to the information you're trying to translate here? Because as you talked about, like that, a demonstration of talking head. If we're talking to a certain demographic and then we need to put this information to them, this is the way that they're going to consume it most easily. Back to you mentioned the cartoon, the lovely kind of, or someone mentioned infographic. There's you could look at. But I think to answer this person, if you look at what the visual content is, who it's for, and then look at the right formats, you can do a bit of mapping there. But again, it's good to sit down and talk it through.
Yeah, an animation that I'm making for a 5-year-old is not the same as an animation I'm making for a university graduate. They're going to look dramatically different. Unless it's Bluey, and that's great for everyone.
And we've had a couple of people asking about us sharing the links to the tools that we just rattled off. Yes, we will. I will be after this session putting the video up onto the Aspect platform, and we shall put the links of the many tools that we rambled through there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just encourage you to try it and just like play with it and see what works for you. And if you feel like actually editing on mobile is difficult for me, like I can't do that, then yeah, try a desktop editing tool or something like
I
that.
think the key message for me is there's some great tools out there to do this. It used to be impossible unless you had something like an Adobe, which I've never found very intuitive. There's a lot more really, really simple tools out there to do this.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And you can just, grab your phone and press record on Instagram and then just send it out.
Be brave, just go for it.
Be brave and just go for it. And yeah, give yourself permission to. I was going to say give yourself permission to fail, but even that I feel like it's too strong. Give yourself permission to
not be
play
perfect.
and to not be perfect, to just recognize, well, what did I learn from that? What would I do differently next time?
Yeah.
The next time I'm going to do it, and to sort of build on it that way.
I think that's our call to action to everyone: is go and make a video, go and play,
Get
your phones up, go make a video.
Go and play. If you do have any follow-up questions, then yes, do feel free to reach out to me. I could talk about this till the cows come home, but as I'm sure you can tell.
Thank you all very much for your time today. That was great. We are videoing it. And just to remind everybody dialing in here, please do come back for the other sessions. If you can't make any of them, they are all being recorded. And I look forward to seeing you all again. So go off and enjoy the rain.
Yeah. Thank you very much,
Take care. Bye.
Take care.
And it is still raining.